the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. At this time, I'll go ahead and ask if there's any additions, corrections, modifications, or substitutions to the current agenda.
I wanted to make a couple of modifications, actually additions, I guess they are, two actually. The first is concerning the board vacancy. I'd like to clarify a matter concerning board member communication about school board vacancies. I'd like to have a discussion about that. The second one is, and I don't know if you want me to stack them up right now. The second one is I'd like to modify the agenda to discuss the communication workshop retreat.
Okay. I have a motion to amend the agenda to place on there a discussion of the board retreat, as well as to make an addition for a discussion about the board member vacancies. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Where do these come in the agenda?
I think the discussion about the retreat would come under continuing business, since this was something previously worked on by the board, and the recruitment, both of them continuing business.
So there would be an item C and a D. As I learned with the at the ISBA training that we attended back in July, with any addition or modification to the agenda, there needs to be a reason for that. Would you mind stating the reason for the record?
Sure. The board vacancy issue is current, and there seems to be some reason to discuss it that's gone back and forth. The communication workshop retreat also is current. I don't feel that everyone was given an opportunity to weigh in about the purpose, the place, and the facilitators, the nature of it.
Okay. Any further discussion? With that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of adding items C and D, the board retreat discussion, as well as board vacancy discussion to the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay?
No.
With a split vote, 2-2, and no tiebreaker, it does not make the agenda at this time. Okay. We will go ahead and move on with the accolades. And I'll turn the time over to Trustee Corker for that.
So I have an accolade, which I didn't give in time for the recipients to be able to hear it in person, but I wanted to honor, to give an accolade for Catherine Graves and Kathy Baker, who, well, I'll just go into it. It's my honor to give this accolade for Catherine Graves and Kathy Baker, who tirelessly served as trustees on the Blaine County Board of Trustees until June of this year. I did not have the opportunity to give this accolade while they were still on the board, so I'm doing it now, as their incredible contribution to the education of the children of Blaine County cannot be overstated. I would like to say a few words about each. Catherine Graves has volunteered in Blaine County Public Schools since her first son, Andrew, entered kindergarten in 2001. Now, 14 years later, her second son, Danny, is a senior, and she is still one of the most active volunteers in our district. Catherine served on the Haley Elementary PTA board starting in 2005. In 2006, she went down to Boise and lobbied legislators for property tax funding of schools, which has delivered almost $30 million of property tax funding to BCSD every year since. Without this funding, our district would not exist as we know it. She was co-president of Haley PTA, co-chair of Senior Bash, involved in so many teacher luncheons and other volunteer efforts that no one would ever be able to count them all. Last but not least, Catherine was a BCSD board member from 2010 to 15. She devoted thousands of hours to school district matters and always gave issues her full attention. She flew under the radar, thought about things deeply, and always thought it was best for the board to quote-unquote sleep on it rather than rush important decisions. This was wise advice. We should all be profoundly grateful for her service. Kathy Baker jumped right into Haley PTA board as vice president, then was president for 3 years. She started some of the events like Family Reading Night that make Haley Elementary the great school that it is. Perhaps her biggest contribution to the culture of the school was growing the science fair from 20 kids to 70 student participants and kicking it off the night before with Family Science Night, which featured the Wood River High School girls basketball team running hands-on science experiment stations so that the students see strong female role models. Kathy joined the board in 2013 and immediately jumped in there too with a leadership role in the McKinstry lawsuit negotiations. Her math skills were invaluable in understanding the complexities of the case. She was the only woman in a room of 15 men. It was truly a David and Goliath situation with the CEO, COO, and chief engineer of McKinstry, a corporation worth hundreds of millions of dollars, versus a small Idaho school district. Nothing got by Kathy, and in the end, the deal that ended up being struck saved the school district millions of dollars more than the one originally proposed by McKinstry. Kathy went on to help the district in other ways, too numerous to mention, during her service on the board. She always illuminated issues with her calm discourse and incisive questions. I can still hear her say, "Point of clarification," before she asked a question that was usually at the heart of an important matter. Kathy elevated the board both intellectually and professionally. It was an honor to serve with Catherine and Kathy on the Blaine County School Board of Trustees, and I know my fellow trustees share my gratitude to them. Their contribution to the education of the children of Blaine County School District will serve as a shining example of excellence in civic participation, leadership, and service to our entire community.
Thank you, Trustee Corker. I think that was very well written, very well said, and I'd like to echo my gratitude and for the lessons that they taught me and the service that they have done for the children of Blaine County School District. So thank you for writing that accolade. At this time, we'll move forward with the public comment. And as a reminder, as per our policy, we have a 3-minute time limit. And I'd like to thank our board clerk, Amanda LaChance, for helping us find a courteous way to help remind people of that 3-minute time limit. And she'll be putting that up on the screen. So I have not received any public comment cards as of yet. At this time, I'll go ahead and open up out of courtesy for those who wish to make a public comment. Seeing none, I guess we'll go ahead and move forward with the superintendent report. I'll turn the time over to Dr. Holmes.
As you received Friday in your board packets, you got some updated information on the Idaho reading inventory and the STAR reading data. These are tools that we use for progress monitoring. If you're confused on why I'm talking about this instead of SAT, since we had earlier talked about SAT, the state extended the embargo on that data, so we're honoring their embargo and waiting until next month to talk about it, type of thing. But this is the end of the year data on how we're doing in the IRI, or the Idaho Reading Inventory, is a measure of students' ability to decode words and read fluently. So it's not a comprehension measure, but it is those early reading skills that are really important. As you look at them, you'll see kindergarten is our strong spot. First grade, we need some improvement if you're looking at the IRI. Second and third grade, we had some good growth, and as you see, there's individual schools that, in each individual school's results are different, so each school has their own areas to focus on. In the STAR reading data, it goes from 6th grade through 8th grade, but we're focusing primarily on the elementary and trying to improve our elementary reading scores. Last year we spent a lot of time in the second semester looking at reading instruction, if you remember me talking about that, and principals and myself visiting classrooms, looking at what was happening. Our second grade students made some great progress last year. Our third grade students are struggling. So now with having some intense look at it, this year it will be the task of the elementary schools to really figure out how are they going to do this, how are they going to improve reading, and in a very authentic way. Have kids involved in more authentic reading and writing, and I'm saying that because I don't want anybody, especially us, to be the ones who are sending an erroneous message that by struggling with our reading scores, we want to push more worksheets or drill and skill type of thing. We want kids to be involved in reading and writing about things that they're passionate about. That's part of our finding things to inspire them and engage them and to be really involved in authentic reading. So we'll continue to monitor that yet this year, and I know we got at least one elementary principal who's already all over it. The second thing tonight is each time I'm trying to bring you an example of inspired or engaged or empowered students in our district. And I'd hope to actually have a real student here tonight to share, but we'll hopefully have her next month. And so tonight we're going to see some students who are highly engaged in learning some pretty hard lessons about power and conflict. And this is in Mr. Reardon's social studies class at the middle school in collaboration with the Sun Valley Center for the Arts and the Company of Fools, and really wrapping their minds about what conflict means and what it is to live in conflict. So, take it away.
Forgotten. Go. Hi, I'm Denise Simone. I'm one of the core company artists at Company of Fools, which is a part of the Sun Valley Center for the Arts. And this week, I'm at the Wood River Middle School working with the 7th graders on a unit in their humanities class on peace and conflict.
Hi, my name is Tim Reardon. I'm a humanities teacher at the Wood River Middle School. We're focusing on Southwest Asia, and we've been narrowing it down for the kids. And right now, we're taking a look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the West Bank. One of the biggest challenges I have, our students come from this wonderful protected valley that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Now, how do you take a group of students who have never seen real conflict and real turmoil and people in real distress and get them to actually buy into it and take away something that really helps them develop and gain perspective?
So as a theater artist, we are exploring big issues such as conflict, resolution, peace, empathy, compassion, through the use of theater exercises, and specifically what we call sculpting work. We actually use our bodies as clay. And so you have activities that can be individually, so you're just working with your own body. You'll hear a word, you'll put yourself in a sculpture, hold it with energy. We'll do paired sculpting, where someone is clay, someone is the artist, and they'll actually use sculpted image. For instance, we sculpted 3 children today.
A Jewish boy, a Bedouin, a young man, and a young lady who's living in a Palestinian refugee camp. And we're asking the students to assume those people's personalities. Try and imagine what would it be like to live in that area.
It might be that the religion is prohibited in the area that they're in. And that's what I thought.
And then the really exciting ones are the group sculpture, where every single individual comes in, freezes on how they feel about the word that is given or the image or the trigger, and they'll come together and they have to connect or touch a part of the sculpture without changing the other part to then produce a whole kind of collective comment.
Denise has done a fantastic job of taking them through the sculpting process to where now they're actually reacting to words, trying to show empathy, compassion, trying to get a handle on what the violence might be like, what the destruction might be like.
It helps us learn in a new way, and I think it probably helps use a different part of your brain.
They open themselves up a little bit more to the feeling that people are actually suffering through this whole war, and we're over here playing with our iPads and phones and all this are over there suffering and crying and dying, and it helps us get a better understanding.
Danger, go. I just came out with you. You'll see these unbelievable creative expressions coming to life, and that's been unbelievably rewarding.
Giving them the perspective, giving them some ideas, maybe giving them the drive within to do something about this, to try and help, to become a voice against this kind of violence against children is just something that I really strive for. The main thing we want the kids to take away from this unit is perspective, that things are not the same across the world. We don't live in one world. And I really want them to understand how difficult things are for people their age in other places in the world. And I think that through the project with Sun Valley Center for the Arts, we're making progress toward that goal.
So I would submit to you that those are engaged students, and that's something we're striving for all of our kids. And we'll keep trying to highlight examples of what it means to be inspired and engaged while also learning your school lessons.
All right, I appreciate that. Are there any questions, comments?
Yeah,
Trustee
actually, I have
Clayton.
a couple questions regarding the STAR testing.
Yes.
In the year overs.
Sorry.
Okay.
You wanted to see it a second time, right?
Exactly. I just had a chance to review that over the weekend when I was reading the materials. And it appears that 3/4 of the population tested are not reaching target, 1/4 is on target as far as the results go.
On STAR?
On
Or on
STAR.
IRI?
Like I'm just looking at greens, yellows, and reds.
Okay,
right?
no, greens, yellows, and reds is going to be growth.
And there's a targeted growth, and the green represents achieving targeted growth, correct?
On the STAR, on page 14 of your report, if you have that, actually, the yellow should just say 5% growth. It should not say still. Should not say still not on target. So that's a mistake on my part. What we are focused on right there is decreasing the number of kids in the bottom quartile or the bottom percentile, the 25th percentile and below, because this is a normed test. So the majority of your kids are going to be in the second and third quartile, and so that's where we want to see most of them. Of course, we would like to be like Lake Wobegon and have all of them in the top quartile, but not yet. So on that one, we're focusing on getting the kids out of the bottom percentile. So you'll see, for example, Altura second grade decreased the number of kids who were in that bottom quartile by 17 percentage points. So that's why it's marked green. And then yellow should be that they had at least a 5% growth, and red should be, yeah.
So if you look at it, it looks like you're doing a great job within the schools. Second grade, year over. There's good performance there.
Yes.
Beyond that, the performance is good in carry and otherwise fair to average.
Yes.
What would you attribute that to?
Well,
because you're having performance at one level, and is there new implementations or what?
Last year there was a new English language arts curriculum, which was part of, I think it was prior to your time on the board, part of the reason why we left everybody alone the first semester, because they had brand new materials, and we were trying to let them have time to look at it. Second semester, principals and I began looking at classroom instruction. So what I would attribute it to is lack of time reading and writing. It's not lack of time of doing worksheets or those kinds of things, but so that's why my conversation was around how do we get kids doing more authentic reading and writing. It is a long-standing tradition, way back to when I started teaching school 30-some years ago, because I was a first grade teacher when I first started. And it's a long-standing tradition that we put kids in reading groups, and that a group comes to the table and works with me, the teacher, and then everybody else is occupied with something. I work with this group for 10, maybe 15 minutes if I'm lucky. Then it's time to change so that I can get to every group. And so how do we break that cycle of instruction so that kids are engaged in authentic reading and writing for the whole hour or the whole 90 minutes, however much time is built into the schedule for that? Because really the reality is if they're only working with me, the teacher, for 15 minutes and the rest of the time they're doing worksheets or other things to keep them occupied, they're spending 15 minutes a day on working to learn how to read instead of 60 minutes or 90 minutes. So that was the predominant thing we saw last year. And I do have to say I was encouraged by the end of the semester. People were on to me or on to what was going on. And so there was a lot more reading and writing happening, because there's a lot of reading and writing students can do with each other as partners or in small teams. And the teacher doesn't have to be there to make it happen. So that's what I predict that we'll see a lot more of this year in the elementary schools, and we'll continue to improve those scores when we get more than 15 minutes reading instruction a day.
Good answer. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions from the board? I'd just like to say thank you for continuing to bring data to us every month, as well as helping us to remember our mission to inspire, engage, educate, and empower every student. So I appreciate you including that in your report. So, with that, we'll move into the board chair report. And under announcements, we have our board retreat on August 27th, 2015. It's going to be a communications retreat where we, as a board, we're going to have Karen Echeverria and a communications specialist from ISBA come and sit with us and help us get back to the basics on some communication protocol for the board, as well as an understanding of how to disagree respectfully as a team. So with that, we also have Sir Ken Robinson at the all-day staff work session, not kickoff, work session, on September 3rd. We're excited to have him come and have our staff members there to be able to not only hear him speak to us, but take some of his thoughts and have some group think time and some brainstorming time, and come back at the end of the day and share what each different group has come up with. So I'm excited for that. So board members, please make sure that's on your calendar. We are invited to attend. We have the first day of the 2015-16 school year on September 8th. And we also have our meeting of the board on that night as well, which is kind of why we pushed to have this room ready for tonight, so we didn't have so much going on that September 8th starting of school. And with that, I'd like to thank Howie and Teresa for all of their team's hard work in getting this room up and ready. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. So we also, I believe that concludes the announcements for the board chair report. And we'll go ahead and move on to continuing business. Item A, appoint community members to the Finance Committee. We began discussing this a little bit last month, and I believe that I appointed Mr. Lyman Drake to that Finance Committee for my appointment. And I will go ahead and open it up for discussion and for the appointments from the fellow trustees.
Mine is Gary Morrison.
My representative from my zone was appointed by Catherine last year, and I called him, and he is willing to do another year.
Okay.
Remind me who it is.
Mike Beck.
And Trustee Clayton, were you able to?
I do not have one at this time.
Okay.
And I, for my two appointments of administrator and teacher, Rob Ditch and Beth Andrews have agreed to serve a second year.
So can we put it out to the community so that we can get another person on it? How does that work?
The way the policy reads, if I'm remembering correctly, is that each board member appoints one. In lieu of the vacancy that we do have, I think we as a board can appoint one for now.
Well, the person who's originally from that zone is the one who gets to appoint. I mean, who's from that zone that was vacated is the one who gets to appoint.
So the
Correct.
person needs to be from that.
Yeah,
zone.
if that zone was vacated. So you're appointing yours, I'm appointing mine, you're appointing yours, and Rob gets to appoint one. And you don't necessarily have to appoint who you were given by whoever was before you.
I'm not even sure.
So did you call the person and they couldn't do it?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
I didn't have a chance to get to that.
Oh, okay. So maybe they might.
So I could go ask them and see if they're still willing. We have time to do that, right?
Yeah, I think the Finance Committee is set to gear back up. in September, as well as the Policy Committee and the Wellness Committee. So prior to that, gearing up in September, we need to make sure that that you speak with that member. And because we have a vacancy in Zone 2, do you recall who was appointed from Zone 2?
Might have been Sandy, or
Yeah, I've got it in here somewhere, if I
can't remember.
And with that being said,
Or John.
I'll go ahead and open that up to board members' thoughts on whether the board is John Gaddard, whether the board as a whole wants to continue with him, or whether we'd like to wait for that appointment until the new trustee gets on board in probably October, and ask for thoughts on that.
I think it continues until the next person comes in, but that's just the way that I would do it.
Okay. Do you have a view?
No, I think if someone's willing to do it, I'd be willing to call John and see if he's still interested in serving.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I think that's, especially where it was a brand new committee in its first year, they did a lot of research and a lot of groundwork, and I think it would be very beneficial to have a lot of the same members continue for this year, keeping in mind that they're on a 3-year maximum, and so next year we might want to start thinking about rotating one or two members in to kind of catch them up to speed as well, so we have not a mass exodus of knowledge at one time. So.
I think I'm going to work on the policy a little bit, because the committee itself has to be strengthened, because they didn't understand exactly what they were supposed to be doing, and that became obvious that the first year we had the whole, as you were saying, the whole group came in, and then they would all come out at the same time, so you'd get a whole new crop, and that wouldn't work. So they should have been staggered in that policy from the beginning, so I'm working on that.
Okay. And I just an assumption, I'm assuming you're going to submit that to the Policy Committee for review and then recommendation back to the board for approval, or, okay. Sounds good. Well, I believe I'm hearing consensus, and if you wouldn't mind contacting John Gaddard to ensure that he's still willing to participate, and Trustee Clayton, if you wouldn't mind contacting the appointed person from that zone to ensure that they're willing to participate, continue participating. So.
And if I could just add on to that, I think, I'm looking for the policy, I think it's the superintendent's directed to get it started, so I'll go ahead and put a date on the calendar like they did last year. They usually met the Tuesday after the board meeting, and pull them together, and then that night they elect their officers and set their calendar, and we're off and running. So I'll get that scheduled so we're going.
Right.
Excellent.
Right.
Thank you very much.
I happen to be the board liaison on that, and so yeah, anything, if you have a question, it would be really helpful for me to know it. The other thing is, I think your person is not John, I think it's Sandy.
Okay.
It is Sandy Boone, if I'm saying that last name right.
Okay. So.
Got it covered.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's comments and discussion. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to item B, discussion framework for gathering community input. And I believe, Dr. Holmes, you have a memo to the board.
It really is trying to be a compilation of everything that I heard in discussions with you in the one-on-ones, and it's just a starting place. But how do you get feedback from the public on how they would like us to go about the next round of financial planning? We've been searching through the records, and the best we can tell, the last financial plan was put together in 2006 when the stabilization levy was passed, and so we're past due for having one on that. So you'll see from the memo on how do we get started on that. These are just things that all came out from in the different one-on-ones, and so have at it. Figure it out how you want to do it. But how do we get public voice involved? And I did hear from at least 2 of you the suggestion that we also start talking about the building levy at the same time as we're talking about the general fund, and how to what to do with the building levy as we get the funds collected we need to pay off the coming bills.
I would definitely agree that it's would be very beneficial to get our finance committee to be able to look at the current building levy, to see where we're at with that, and garner their recommendations on how to proceed. I know the promise was made when the levy, plant facilities levy was passed, that if we did not need a new school, that a new elementary school, that those monies would not be collected or would be turned back to the taxpayers. And so in order to get the finance committee's views and buy-in on where we are and how to proceed with the plant facilities levy, as well as really how to structure the budget in the future for the next 5 years, whether we're just going to try and, as a board and as a district, try and make those cuts so we have our expenses are flat with our expenditures, or excuse me, our revenues are flat with our expenditures, or whether we're going to entertain the idea of another levy, garner public support, see where they're at, as well as, like I said, take the financial committee's recommendations to heart. Other comments?
Are we talking about, we're talking about communication for the guidelines now, budget guidelines?
How to get public input.
Right. So I sent out something to the board, and I'm sorry I didn't print it out, but another school district did this, and they had a survey, and I thought it was very illuminating. They had the exact same issue. But it all depends on what you're asking people in a multiple choice. If you're asking people just to come up with words, you might get too broad a spectrum. So what I would like to propose is that school level committees or school level PTAs or however they're organized, anyone who wants to participate at the school level who wants to come up and say and give some ideas about what their priorities are, what the guidelines are, list a few keywords that then could go out for a survey so that we're truly generating the entire thing. So we're not guiding it at all. And these are people who probably are very interested, and many of them are involved and have been involved for years. So, for example, Haley PTA is a very vibrant PTA. I think that they would be able to understand what the priorities might be and give us some guidelines on that, and then we could put it out to the greater community, find out if that was really something that was important.
I think that's a great idea. To get the parents involved and stakeholders, people who we'd be asking money for another levy from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I see under the proposed timeline is having a round of listening tours from the board with all those different parent stakeholder groups, whether it be the PTA, but not just necessarily the parents,
Yeah.
but community partners, business
Right.
leaders,
That's a good point.
and all stakeholders. So we have a true sense of not just parents, but the community as a whole.
So I
Trustee
think what
Clayton.
you're saying, Liz, is let them be prepared first to deliver to us versus an open forum, right?
Yeah.
And even maybe some guidance might be helpful too. Like that thing you sent, the
Right.
piece you sent out, kind of like the prioritization in those titles that they had as far as areas of concern.
And the
So
way they
I
framed
don't
it.
know what level of guidance be provided. I mean, I think it's fine to let them just go figure it out, but maybe some degree of guidance initially would be important too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
maybe.
here's some main points where, here's the nut, here's what we're trying to get to. Tell us what you really value, right?
Yeah, like
At
raising,
least
almost
some,
like coming up
some
with
degree
the
of it.
priorities and then
Yeah.
letting them,
Forced choice rankings.
yeah, something where they can,
You know, not categorize them, give our
Right,
priority,
right.
inflict our opinion, but at least give something as far as, rather than just an open table. I think it'll be much more expeditious.
And I liked what you said also, Sean. You're absolutely right. Most people who live here are not parents. So we have to be very careful that the people who are taxpayers are not ignored. So my suggestion ignored that, so I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah. I really like the idea of a forced choice. That way it's not just an open free-for-all, but it's they have to rank on what's most important to them, and then that can really tell us a lot as a board.
How should we handle that?
I know that we have a contract currently with K-12 to administer surveys, and I believe that they can arrange that.
Where's Heather? Because she's our contact with K-12. They can even come in and lead the groups for us if we want somebody, if we have listening meetings or whatever they are. So we have an outside facilitator, so it's not a district person that's facilitating the meeting, and then collect all that information, put it into the surveys that they do, like we do the parent engagement, the staff engagement one. That's the surveys that they do. So they would put it in there, and we could have it be a forced choice type of thing. Because I know the one thing that, in looking at what this other district did, they had 7 or 8 things listed on there, and there were. I didn't know if they were listed in order of priority, but I thought almost everything on that list could be used to justify something that's in our budget right now. So I want them to even be more forceful in telling us, information about, and don't go past this line or something. I don't. How do you get them to give feedback on? We want all this stuff, and we're going to pay for it, or this is as much as we're going to pay, so go to that line and then stop, or those kinds of pieces of information. Because if you took that list and put it out to all the department directors and schools and stuff and said everything you put in your budget has to be justified by one of these things, we'd come back with a complete justification of everything we're doing. So make it even harder.
That sounds good.
I actually really like that.
So I'd love to keep the money in the community. I think that I know that we've had facilitators before in the past from our community. So I think that maybe, rather than maybe having someone to come in from K-12 from outside.
It doesn't cost us anymore. We have a yearly flat contract with them to do those surveys that we've been using, that you started 2 years ago.
And they pay for facilitators and everything.
It's all a part of that contract. We can max it out and work them to death, or we can run 2 surveys. It costs us the same amount.
I'm just curious how much
So
they're
that's something we
charging.
paid for. Then we should do something.
Yeah, work them to death. How much are we paying for that? I'm just curious how much.
Pay for it? Is it about $20,000?
For 2 years?
No, a year.
$20,000 a year.
A year to do those. We have a student engagement survey, a parent engagement survey, our climate survey, and a staff engagement survey, right? Plus, like I said, they'll come do other things for us.
So when do we I thought we were having like some kind of a work session to come to some conclusion of what we were doing. What's that? How are we going to put this out to the community? We have to sit down and figure out what these priorities are, or how we're going to conduct these meetings?
As far as I know, I'm hearing consensus to have the Finance Committee start to look at the levies, and I think that's what we as a board are here discussing on how and what kind of timeline to engage the community members, whether it be the PTAs or all the different various stakeholder groups, on how to do that. Gwen Carroll, or Dr. Holmes, has given us a possible timeline in her memo to us, and which would include the Finance Committee looking at that, and then September through November, the board conducting those listening tours all over the county with those facilitators from K-12 as well as the surveys, and then the board coming back in January to have that hardline discussion on the guiding principles with that finalized in February. My only fear with that is if we push that to February, does that give enough time
No.
for the budget before April?
The guiding principles this last year were February.
So does that mean that there's going to be no reallocation of positions or no change around in priorities in terms of budget from now until February, in terms of taking positions away or adding positions, anything like that?
Out of the current budget?
Yeah.
My understanding was when we kept Kelly Choma that the action was to cease and desist on that for this year and to make it a part of next year's budget
Right.
conversation.
So no reallocations.
changes
Everything's
this
set
year.
in concrete is right now in terms of
We're
our...
talking about people, so.
Right,
yeah,
right. No, I understand. That seems to tie hands for a long time in a situation in our school district that's always dynamic. I mean, just, as far as what the kids' needs are, I feel like we should move that up.
We should what?
Move it up.
So you would make changes in the current budget we're operating?
No, I would move up the priorities so that we're, yeah.
So am I understanding that you're proposing, instead of having that board discussion on guiding principles in January, to possibly move that up to December, possibly looking at where we have the longest time period in September and October, do the listening sessions with the survey with forced choice going out in November. We begin that discussion in December and finalized in January?
I would fast track it. I mean, fast track it, because this is a decision, these are going to be our guiding principles. They're not the individual decisions, but the individual decisions depend on that. The school district, the direction that we go, we should be nimble.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you are still looking at positions through attrition, whether they need to be refilled currently, and it's not necessarily that they're not automatically refilled, but they're still going to be looked at. So, yeah.
So, and what was your idea for the role of the Financial Accountability Committee? I didn't quite understand that.
The finance committee, to be able to take a look at our current budget, but tie in to see what their recommendations are on possible revenue sources for us to increase our revenue, or whether they would recommend just taking and cutting out the excess expenditures above and beyond where our revenues come in, or along with that, also take a look at the plant facilities levy to see where we're at, what we've currently collected, what we need to collect in order to pay back those QSCBs that we as a board have been able to do our remodel construction projects under, to be able to pay those back, as well as do we feel that we need to collect the entire plant facilities levy, or can we look at turning that back to the taxpayers, and how to do that in the most economic sense for the district.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the first purview of the Financial Committee coming right up was the business manager treasurer.
As well.
And that's a big deal.
As well.
And so I would say that we should cut back on that. I would say that the Financial Committee, I would like to hear from the community as a whole. And then the Financial Accountability can take those guidelines and perhaps work with them. That would be my...
I can see the guidelines definitely, but I think that they need to start looking at long-term on where we stand with our plant facilities levy and what's the best recommendations for us as a board to consider doing for the plant facilities levy. I totally agree that they need to look at that business manager treasurer position as we've directed them to do so at the last meeting, but I don't foresee that as being a 3-month process. It could be. I could be wrong. But I think that they can possibly juggle a couple balls at the same time and begin their discussions on that, as well as begin the background information on the plant facilities levy, where we're at and where we need to go with that.
Mm-hmm. But I just don't want that to hold up.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed. Any other comments?
I have one.
Okay.
In going through this, there were some guiding questions in the memo, and I don't know if those are the right questions, but I know one question that I need to have, and the leadership team needs to have, is what will be the board's measure of success in reaching multiple stakeholders? So when we get, we'll be out beating the bushes and trying to get people to participate in meetings. It'll be a really compressed schedule, and so, what is your measure of success? So that when we get done, we can say we reached 2,000 people, or we reached 20 different stakeholder groups, or what is it you want to accomplish?
I'll go ahead and turn that back for discussion. Thoughts from the board?
How did we measure getting input on the strategic plan?
We kept track of how many people responded to the surveys and how many people participated in the meetings. Now, we didn't keep track by the fact that maybe the same parent went to all 3 meetings, but we kept track of each meeting and all of those surveys.
Would there be a way to cross-reference to make sure that the same person's not going to getting counted multiple times to the different meetings?
K through 12.
Or is that too time extensive for personnel?
I was going to say, well, we might be filling a few positions if we go that direction. It's pretty time consuming.
Yeah.
It's a data entry issue.
So it seems to me that it all comes down to the quantitative data that you'd get on a survey, and everything else is leading up to that, and the survey can be answered at the meetings, and that K through 12 should have a way that this duplication doesn't happen, I would hope, because that seems like an obvious problem.
I'm not sure the surveys would happen at the meeting. Let me go back and make sure I have an understanding. September through October, we would be meeting with as many stakeholder groups as we could possibly engage and get in front of, and ask them to give us some feedback on what they think are the most value adds in the district, or what is the most important pieces of the budget. That information would then be put into a forced choice survey, so that if one meeting they said dual immersion because we happen to be in the dual immersion community, and at another meeting they said AP because we happen to be in the high school world, but those don't cross anywhere, all of that would then be thrown into the forced choice survey, which would happen in December. And then that would give you the stuff to start discuss. No, forced choice survey is now happening in November, which gives you the conversation starting in December, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask a clarifying point? Do these listening tour meetings need to be posted as open meetings since they are deliberations or get the board garnering information for upcoming things?
If you guys are going to be there, which is it a listening tour or what is it?
Okay.
You could call it town hall meetings and not be there, but I think it's important that you be there.
Yeah, no, I think it's.
Split it up among yourselves. You don't have to go to every single one. So
I think
you
it's
can have
important
two
that the.
representatives at every meeting or
Well, it'd be good to
Yeah.
have it interactive too, right? Like, I mean, there should be some discourse within those settings that we just don't sit here like the judges and then people give us their opinions. Like, we should have a conversation, I think.
Mhm.
So would that be deemed like a workshop, or?
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that's the form. I would encourage that format.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to be able to ask questions, talk, have a conversation.
The other thing that this begs the question is, are we looking for guidelines that are school-wide? For example, I noticed on the guidelines that the other school did, it was class size. So if you get more kids in secondary school, then the elementary school favored program that might come up would be drowned out. So do we want to be saying this can only be a school-wide guideline? Because there are some good programs that people might want that are either secondary school or elementary school. So I think that's a tricky one. Maybe we have two. I mean, two different aspects, school-wide and non-school-wide.
When you say school-wide, you mean district-wide?
I'm sorry, district-wide. Yeah.
That
Sorry.
makes more
It
sense.
may be simpler to frame, though, because basically what we're talking about is if this is the pie of x and the pie shrinks to x minus, what is most important to you when it shrinks? We're not talking about adding anything. What we're talking about really, what do you value the most and what do you want to keep? We don't really want to create anything here. We want to come up with efficiencies that dictate where we go, because there will be cuts inevitably.
Right.
What do you value? What don't you value that currently exists? I think trying to recreate something at this juncture would not be wise. I think you would need to look at what currently exists and then where the efficiencies come out of that conversation.
I guess I didn't make myself very clear. What I meant was if you've got a subset, say you've got a subset that's smaller, that has a prime program. Okay, so say IB, it's 6 through 8.
Mm-hmm.
That as a percentage of the school is not very big. That could get drowned out by something that's school-wide, say class size. I'm sorry, district-wide.
District-wide.
Yeah, class size. So I'm trying to get that balance there where we don't devalue things. It's a tricky balance because some of these are our flags. For example, AP, elementary school parents have that's not on their priority list. So, and yet it's very high at the high school. So I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I see your point, where you're basing and making decisions for kids basically from 5 years of age clear up to 18. There's a multiple facet of importance and what's more important on any one group at any given time. But I think that's why dealing with the entire stakeholders as a whole, we don't have a huge contingency of just high school kids or a huge contingency of just elementary school. And that's why I think if we can try and take the balance of everybody, we can try and work through that. Trustee Clayton.
Well, then the consideration could conceivably be through these workshops or whatever, have one in elementary, have one in middle school, and have one in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the three distinct areas. Why not just divide by that? Because there are stakeholders to each. People want to cross over, great, but then define those three because that's what you just defined, right? So that's not that complicated because those are the different, significantly different groupings of educational thought.
Right. I noticed that, I'm sorry, didn't.
I just would say, let's look back at what we just finished with the strategic plan. We know we're going to get 20 million and one opinions because we have very diverse thinking from one end of the county to the other, which is to be expected. We go from Cary and